I want to start today by asking you to picture a scene with me. It's late March 1997, and it is unseasonably hot in Rancho Santa Fe, California.
And we should probably be clear about what Rancho Santa Fe is. This isn't just any suburb.
No, not at all. This is one of the most exclusive, wealthiest neighborhoods in the entire country. We're talking massive, gated communities, perfectly manicured lawns, sprawling Spanish-style mansions.
It's the picture of American success, really. But inside one of those mansions, a huge one, like 9,000 square feet, there's this silence, a really heavy silence.
A heavy silence, and as the first deputies on the scene would report, a heavy smell.
That's right. It wasn't just the quiet that was oppressive. When the San Diego Sheriff's Department deputies first walked in, that was what hit them before they saw a single thing. The smell of decomposition, amplified by that California heat. It was overwhelming.
Absolutely. And when they finally moved through the house, what they found, this defies the logic of what we typically think of when we hear the term crime scene.
Right, because it wasn't chaotic. It wasn't what you'd call violent, not in the traditional sense. It was orderly, almost ritualistic.
Military, even. They found 39 bodies, 39 people, all dressed in identical black shirts and plain black sweatpants.
And they all had these patches on their sleeves, Heaven's Gate away team.
Lying peacefully in bunk beds, each one covered from the waist up with a pristine purple shroud. And then, of course, there's the detail that just burned itself into the public consciousness forever.
The shoes.
The black and white Nike decades, all 39 of them.
Exactly. It was an image that looked less like a mass suicide and more like some bizarre, quiet dormitory where everyone had just decided to go to sleep at the very same time. It was the precision of it all that was so deeply unsettling.
And the world it just exploded. I remember this so vividly. The media circus was immediate and, frankly, kind of gross.
Oh, totally. You had Saturday Night Live doing skits about it within, a few days. Late-night hosts were falling over themselves to make jokes about the crazy cult.
Look at these lunatics who thought a spaceship was hiding behind a comet. That was the narrative. It was framed as this inexplicable explosion of madness. A freak show for the evening news.
Well, it's always easier to laugh at something you don't understand, right? If you just label them as crazy, you create this safe distance. You can tell yourself, I would never do that. I'm sane.
But I think our mission today is to do something much harder. We have to try and strip away that crazy cult label and actually understand the internal logic of what happened in that house.
And that's the real challenge, because as we've been digging through the source material for this, and we've got a lot, we have biographical records, transcripts of their own audio tapes, sociological studies by people who studied them for years.
The one thing that keeps jumping out at me is that these were not stupid people. This wasn't a group of, lost, drug-addled teenagers they picked up off the street.
Far from it. That's probably the single biggest misconception we have to correct right at the top. The away team, as they called themselves, included some very accomplished people.
Like who?
Well, for starters, a respected Republican politician, the brother of Nettles, Lieutenant Uhura from the original Star Trek.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, and there were business owners, mothers, fathers, and some incredibly skilled computer programmers. These were articulate, intelligent, searching people.
So that's the real question we're trying to answer today, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you get from being a rational, thinking person with a life, with a family, to laying down in a bunk bed, eating applesauce laced with phenobarbital, and willingly putting a plastic bag over your head because you believe it's a graduation?
It's a terrifying journey, but to understand it, we can't just look at the end. The comet is almost a footnote. We have to go all the way back to the beginning.
We have to look at the theology they built.
The theology, the psychology of what experts call bounded choice, and most importantly, we have to look at the two people who started it all. The two. Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. But long before they were Dontai, before they were supposedly commanding a starship crew, they were two very different, very human people living very messy lives in Texas in the early 1970s.
Okay, let's start with Marshall Applewhite. Because if you just looked at his early resume, he seems like the kind of guy who would be a pillar of his community.
Oh, absolutely. He was the son of a Presbyterian minister. He was a gifted baritone singer. He had a master's degree in music. He taught at universities, at the University of St. Thomas, the University of Alabama.
And by all accounts, he was charismatic, stylish. His students apparently loved him. He just doesn't fit the stereotypical profile of a madman cult leader.
He definitely had that stage presence, that charisma, yes. But you have to look at what was churning just beneath that polished surface. And you have to remember the context. This is the early 1970s in the American South.
Right.
Applewhite was dealing with these deep, profound conflicts about his own identity, specifically his sexuality.
He was gay.
He had relationships with men, yes. And in that time and place, especially coming from a conservative minister's family, that wasn't just a lifestyle choice. It was a source of immense internal shame and turmoil.
It led to real-world consequences for him, too.
Huge consequences. He was fired from his teaching position at the University of Alabama over an alleged relationship he had with a male student. His wife, whom he had 2 children with, divorced him. He was losing everything that defined him.
So you have a guy who is talented, he's ambitious, but he feels like his own desires, his own biology, really are just systematically ruining his life.
Precisely. That is the key psychological seed for everything that follows. He felt betrayed by his own human nature. He starts to fall into a deep depression. He's hearing voices. He checks himself into a psychiatric hospital. He was having what we would now identify as a severe mental health crisis.
He was looking for a way out.
He was desperate for an escape from the pain of being Marshall Applewhite. He wanted to transcend the very things, sex, gender, human relationships, that had caused him so much suffering.
And right at that moment of crisis, he meets Bonnie Nettles.
Right. And looking at her background, as you said, she seems like his complete opposite in so many ways. She wasn't an academic or a performer. She was a registered nurse.
A nurse and a mother of 4. Just a seemingly normal middle-class woman.
On the surface, yes. But she was also a seeker in the truest sense of that 70s term. While Applewhite was struggling with the rigid structures of the church, Nettles was diving deep into the whole alternative spiritual scene. She was fascinated by theosophy.
Can we just pause there for a second? Theosophy. I see that word a lot in the research, but what does it actually mean in this context?
Sure. It's a spiritual movement that really kicked off in the late 19th century. And it's a blend of everything, a bit of Eastern philosophy, a bit of Western occultism. But one of the core ideas is that there are these masters of wisdom, these highly evolved spiritual beings who live on another plane and secretly guide humanity's development.
So she's already primed for this idea of higher beings communicating with Earth.
Completely primed. She was already conducting seances, trying to talk to spirits. She truly believed she was in regular communication with a 19th century monk she called Brother Francis.
Okay, so she's very open to this kind of thing.
Very. And get this. She had also been visiting fortune tellers who all told her the same thing. They predicted she was destined to meet a mysterious man, a tall man with light hair and a fair complexion, someone who was going to change her life and maybe the world.
And then Marshall Applewhite walks into her life.
He fits the description perfectly. Now, the story of how they met in 1972 has become a bit of a legend within the group's lore.
How does it happen?
There are conflicting accounts, but the one Applewhite always told was that he was in the hospital either as a patient or visiting a sick friend, and Nettles was his nurse. And when she walked into the room, their eyes locked.
Like something out of a movie.
Exactly. He described it as a shared recognition of esoteric secrets from a past life. He felt instantly that they had known each other for eons, that they had a shared cosmic purpose.
It sounds almost like a romance, but with this spiritual sci-fi twist.
And that's a good way to put it. But it was a platonic spiritual partnership, not a sexual romance at all. In fact, that was part of the point. He felt that she was the sage. In the beginning, she was the one with all the answers.
She was the one channeling the information.
Yes, and he was the speaker. He was the performer, the one who could take her strange, mystical visions and translate them, sell them to the public. He had the charisma.
That dynamic is so interesting because usually we think of the charismatic male cult leader as the sole mastermind. But you're saying she was really the architect of the whole belief system, at least initially.
Initially, absolutely. She provided the entire framework. She was the one who convinced him that his depression, his voices, that it wasn't mental illness.
What did she say it was?
She told him he was evolving, that he was being prepared for a higher purpose. Now imagine how incredibly relieving that must have been for him to hear. You're not broken, you're just special.
That is an incredibly powerful hook.
The most powerful. So they bond over this shared destiny, and they just leave.
They drop everything.
Everything. Nettles walks away from her husband and her 4 children. Applewhite leaves his old life in the dust. They get in a car and just start driving. They became nomads.
I read they spent the next few years just wandering the country, camping in parks, sometimes doing odd jobs.
Odd jobs, and sometimes even selling their own blood plasma just to buy gas.
Selling their blood for gas money. That is such a desperate, stark image.
It was a test. In their minds, they were undergoing a process, a metamorphosis. They started to see themselves as the two witnesses from the book of Revelation.
The two prophets from the Bible who are destined to be killed in Jerusalem and then resurrected 3 days later.
Those are the ones they believe they were the literal biblical fulfillment of that prophecy.
So this is where the theology starts to get really, really blended. Because on one hand, they're pulling directly from the most apocalyptic parts of the Christian Bible. But on the other hand, they're talking about UFOs and spaceships. How do they bridge that gap?
This is the absolute genius, if you can call it that, of their synthesis. You have to look at the culture of the 1970s. The ancient astronaut theory was exploding.
Right, from books like Chariots of the Gods.
Exactly. That book was a massive bestseller. And the basic idea, for anyone who isn't familiar, was that the gods and angels you read about in ancient texts weren't supernatural beings. They were extraterrestrials with advanced technology.
So when the Bible says Elijah was taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire,
to Applewhite and Nettles, that was just a primitive description of a UFO abduction, a beam up.
And when the Bible talks about heaven, it's not some spiritual dimension.
No, it's a literal physical place in the universe, a planet, an actual physical level of existence above the human one. And Jesus wasn't God incarnate. He was an alien. He was a next-level being who came down, occupied a human body for a while, and tried to teach a small group of followers how to graduate to that next level.
That completely reframes the entire goal of religion, doesn't it? If heaven is a real planet, then you don't need to save your soul. You need to get on the ship.
You've got it. That's the core belief. They called it tele, the evolutionary level above human. They preached that humanity is just a larval stage. We are all caterpillars. And the goal of life isn't to be a good human and die and go to a cloudy heaven. The goal is to biologically metamorphose into a butterfly, a new species.
A species that doesn't have gender, doesn't have sexual desire, doesn't die.
A species that is efficient, intellectual, and pure. All the things Applewhite desperately wanted to be. And this message, as strange as it sounds to us now, resonated with people. In 1975, they held a public meeting in a little town called Waldport, Oregon.
They put up flyers, right?
Yeah, posters that said something like UFOs, why they are here, when they are coming. They called themselves the UFO 2, and they expected, maybe a dozen curious locals to show up. The room was packed.
And what was the pitch, exactly?
The pitch was basically, the people you know as Jesus and God the Father are extraterrestrials. We are their representatives. The Earth is about to be recycled, and a spacecraft is coming to pick up those who are ready to evolve. We are leaving soon. Who wants a ride?
And it worked.
It worked spectacularly. About 20 people from that area just vanished. They left their homes, their jobs, their families, and followed the two. It caused a national media frenzy. I mean, Walter Cronkite was reporting on it on the CBS Evening News. 20 people missing in Oregon.
Okay, I have to stop you here.
Yeah.
Because this is the part where my modern skepticism just kicks into high gear. I can understand listening to a lecture. I can even understand being interested in UFOs. But packing a bag and leaving your entire life behind because two strangers said, get in the van.
Yeah.
Who were these people? Were they just incredibly naive?
That's the lazy assumption, right? That they must have been simple-minded or gullible. But the sociologists who studied them, people like Robert Balch, found something very different.
What did he find?
He found that these weren't followers, they were seekers. Many of them had been bouncing around different spiritual movements for years. They'd tried Scientology, they'd tried Eastern mysticism, they'd tried various New Age philosophies. They were spiritually homeless.
They were looking for something they hadn't found yet.
They were looking for structure and certainty. There's a term sociologists use called Sheilaism. It's named after a woman in a famous study who, when asked about her religion, said her religion was just Sheilaism, meaning she just picked and chose whatever beliefs made her feel good on any given day.
That sounds like a lot of modern spirituality.
It is. It's very individualistic. But it's also very lonely. It's uncertain. You're your own guru. Applewhite and Nettles offered the absolute opposite of Sheilaism. They offered total certainty. We know the one true way. We have the map to the spaceship. But you have to do exactly what we say.
For someone who feels lost and adrift in the modern world, that strictness isn't a bug, it's a feature.
It's the main selling point. So they get their first batch of recruits, they have this crew, and this is the part of the story that often gets glossed over. We tend to jump from the 1975 recruitment straight to the 1997 suicide. but there were 22 years in between.
And those years weren't just them sitting around and waiting. It was a boot camp.
It was an intense, all-consuming classroom, as they called it. And you're right, this is crucial. You don't get 39 people to commit suicide on the first date. You get there through 2 decades of slow, methodical conditioning.
They went underground.
Completely. They lived a nomadic life in campgrounds all across the Rocky Mountains and the West. They called themselves Human Individual Metamorphosis, or HIM. And life inside the group was grueling. It was designed to systematically strip away every shred of your old identity.
How did they do that?
Well, first you gave up your name. Your human name was a link to your past, to your family. You were given a new 3-letter name that always ended in Ody, O-D-Y, like Jamudi, Arcody, Elvivodi.
And what did Ody signify?
It meant child of the next level. It intentionally infantilized them. It made them all siblings in this new cosmic family with Do and T as the older members, or basically the parents.
And the rules, the level of micromanagement was just staggering.
Unbelievable. They had documents like the 17 steps. These were detailed step-by-step instructions on how to do everything. How to brush your teeth, how to wash your face, how to cut a pancake.
How to cut a pancake. You cannot be serious.
I am dead serious. You had to cut your pancake in a specific grid pattern. If you did it the human way, like a wedge, it was seen as a sign that your mind was still disorganized, that you weren't thinking efficiently like a next-level being. You'd be corrected.
That sounds absolutely exhausting, to have your every single move policed like that.
It's designed to be exhausting. It occupies all of your mental bandwidth. You're so focused on following the tiny rules that you don't have time to question the big ones. And then there was the check partner system. This, to me, is one of the most terrifying aspects.
What was that?
You were never, ever alone. You were assigned a partner, and your job was to watch that person 24/7 for any sign of human behavior.
So you were spying on each other?
Constantly. If your partner expressed nostalgia for their family, or if they started humming a pop song they remembered, or if they showed frustration or anger, you were required to report them to Do and T.
It's a surveillance state within a campground.
Exactly. And the partners were rotated constantly, so you could never form a genuine bond or friendship with anyone. You couldn't have a best friend. Your only real connection was to the leaders. It was a system of perfect control.
And they had other rituals, too. I read about the tuning forks.
Yes. They believed the air was full of human static or Luciferian frequencies, so they would strike a tuning fork and hold it up to their ears to supposedly tune out the human world and tune into the frequency of the next level.
This is all about purging their humanity.
Purging everything. They went on extreme diets, the master cleanse, where you drink nothing but lemonade with maple syrup and cayenne pepper for wicks on end all to purify their vehicles.
Vehicles, that's the word they use for their bodies.
Always. The body wasn't you, it was just a container, a suit of clothes that you were wearing for a little while. And this constant linguistic dissociation is so important. If you spend 20 years telling yourself, this body isn't me, it becomes a whole lot easier to just discard it when the time comes.
But again, this is what's so strange. These weren't Luddites living in caves. By the 1990s, they were actually quite technologically savvy. They were running a successful business.
This is the great paradox of Heaven's Gate. They became what one sociologist called a cyber sect. In the early 90s, as the internet was becoming a thing, they started a web design company called HireSource.
And they were good at it.
They were very good. They were coding in HTML and Java. They did graphic design for all sorts of commercial clients in the San Diego area. Clients described them as polite, incredibly efficient, but a bit odd.
Because of the identical haircuts and the baggy clothes to hide their gender?
Right, so you have this bizarre situation where they're building websites for, like, a local candy shop or a cinema multiplex by day and then preparing for the apocalypse by night.
Using the tools of the modern world to plan their escape from it.
Exactly. They saw the internet as a powerful tool to spread their message to a global audience, but they viewed the society that built it as fundamentally corrupt. Luciferian, as they would say.
That's a strong word, Luciferian.
It was central to their worldview. They believed the entire planet was under the covert control of Luciferians, these evil space aliens who wanted to keep humans distracted and trapped in their biological containers.
And how do they do that?
Through sex, drugs, family attachments, consumerism, pop culture. To them, watching a sitcom wasn't just harmless entertainment. It was a weapon used by the enemy to keep you from evolving.
Okay, I want to pivot now to a specific moment in their history. Because for a very long time, the plan was not suicide. The plan was that a UFO would physically land, they would all walk up the ramp and fly away, alive.
That was the original promise. They called it the demonstration. They believed they would literally ascend into the sky without dying, just like Jesus supposedly did.
But then, in 1985, reality crashed headfirst into their fantasy.
It did. Bonnie Nettles, the sage, the direct link to the next level, got sick. She was diagnosed with liver cancer, and she died.
This must have been a catastrophic failure for their belief system. The woman who was supposed to lead them onto the spaceship just died a very human death in a hospital in Dallas. If I'm a follower at that point, I'm thinking, wait a minute, she didn't ascend, she's dead. Maybe this whole thing is fake.
And it was a massive crisis. The group nearly fell apart. People left. Applewhite himself was distraught. He went into a deep depression. But this is where a charismatic leader shows their ability to improvise, to reframe reality.
He came up with a new explanation.
He went into isolation for a while and came back with a new understanding from the next level. He gathered the remaining followers and told them that T hadn't died. She had simply exited her vehicle.
He moved the goalposts.
He moved them into a different stadium. He said that her spiritual energy, her next-level consciousness, had become too powerful for her human container to handle, so she had to burn it out. She had gone on ahead to the next level to prepare things for their arrival.
But the implication of that is so dark.
It's chilling, because it meant you didn't actually need your body to travel to the next level. In fact, the body was now seen as an obstacle, a burden.
That is the moment it becomes a potential suicide cult.
That is the pivot point. That's the theological justification. Before 1985, they were a group waiting for a ride. After 1985, they were a group waiting for an excuse to die. The theology shifted from preservation of the body to discarding the vehicle.
So let's fast forward to the late 1990s. They're living in that huge mansion in Rancho Santa Fe. They're paying $7,000 a month in rent.
Paid in cash, by the way, all money they earned from their web design business.
And then the Comet Hale Bopp appears in the sky.
Hale Bopp was a major astronomical event. It was one of the brightest comets in history, visible to the naked eye for a record 18 months. But for the group, the real trigger wasn't just the comet itself. It was a rumor associated with it.
A rumor from a late-night radio show.
That's right. Art Bell, the famous host of the paranormal-themed show Coast to Coast AM, had a guest on who claimed to have a photograph showing a companion object trailing behind the comet. A large, mysterious object. A spaceship.
And astronomers debunked this almost immediately, right? I mean, it was just a background star that was distorted by the telescope's movement.
Yes, it was completely and totally fake. Any real astronomer knew it. But for Applewhite, it didn't matter if it was real to scientists. It was real to him. He seized on it. This was the sign he had been waiting for.
He told the group, Ty is coming back for us. She's in the ship behind the comet. It's time to shut our vehicles and go home.
And the preparations began in earnest. And this is where we have to talk about the castration. It's one of the most horrifying and, I think, revealing details of their final years.
A number of the men, including Applewhite himself, underwent surgical castration. Why?
It goes all the way back to Applewhite's original conflict, his self-hatred for his own sexual desires. The theology taught that sexual urges, what they called mammalian vibrations, were like static interference. They blocked the signal from the next level.
They were an anchor to this world.
The biological anchor. Applewhite convinced himself, and then 7 of his male followers, that as long as they possessed the physical capacity for sex, they were fundamentally tethered to this corrupt human planet. To be truly free, they had to remove the source.
So they went to Mexico to have it done.
They drove to Tijuana, used fake names, and paid for the surgeries. A former member who knew the men said they came back smiling, relieved. They felt they had finally fixed the last broken part of their human vehicles.
The level of commitment that shows is just.
Yeah.
It's absolute.
It's absolute. They weren't playing a game. They were literally surgically altering their bodies to match their image of the androgynous, sexless aliens, the Greys, that they essentially worshipped.
And then came the final exit videotapes. We've all seen the clips of Applewhite, staring into the camera, eyes wide, talking about how much he hates this world.
We do, in all honesty, hate this world. That's the famous quote. And he meant every word of it. They truly believed the Earth was a failed experiment, a garden that had become overgrown with weeds and was about to be spaded under and recycled by the cosmos.
The apocalypse was imminent.
They believed it was days away, and the only way to survive was to leave before it happened.
The other members recorded their own goodbye messages, too. And when you watch them, They don't look like brainwashed zombies. They look happy. They're smiling. They're cracking jokes.
That's the most chilling part of it all. They look like people who are about to go on a long-awaited, exciting vacation. They talk about their vehicles, like their old clunker cars they're finally getting to send to the junkyard. One woman just beams at the camera and says, "I can't wait to get out of this atmosphere."
They had fully adopted the Star Trek language by then. They were the away team.
And they were finally beaming up.
So let's talk about the actual days of the event. It happened between March 22nd and March 26th. How did they do it? Because as we said at the start, it was so orderly.
It was done in 3 waves over 3 days. They started with a group of 15, then another 15, then the final 9, which included Applewhite.
And they had a recipe.
A specific recipe. They took applesauce or pudding, mixed it with a massive dose of phenobarbital, a strong barbiturate, and ate it. Then they washed it down with vodka to speed up the drug's absorption into the bloodstream.
And the plastic bags, what was their role?
Once they fell into a deep sleep from the drugs, the members who were still alive, the ones scheduled for the next wave, would gently place plastic bags over their heads to ensure asphyxiation. It was a fail-safe.
And then those same people would clean up.
Yes. Once their friends were gone, they would remove the bags, drape the purple cloths over them, and tidy up the room. It was an act of service, a ritual.
They were helping their friends graduate.
In their minds, that's exactly what they were doing.
And the Nikes. We have to come back to the Nikes. For a group that so thoroughly rejected consumerism and pop culture, why did they all buy 39 pairs of brand-name sneakers?
People have analyzed this for years, looking for some deep symbolic meaning. But the truth is much more banal.
It was pragmatic.
It was totally pragmatic. Applewhite liked the look of them, yes, but mostly they found a place that would give them a good bulk discount on the model. They needed shoes that looked uniform, were comfortable, and were cheap. That's it.
But you can't ignore the slogan.
Just do it.
It's too perfect. You couldn't write that.
You really couldn't. And former members have said that they did appreciate the slogan because of its connection to their leader's name, Do. It was a little inside joke for them at the end. Just do it. Just follow Doe's final instruction.
And what about what was in their pockets? I read they all had a $5 bill and 3/4. Exactly $5.75. The media immediately called it an interplanetary toll.
Yeah, the media loved that angle. Like, you need to have exact change for the saucer when it lands. But again, the real reason is so much more bureaucratic and sad.
What was it?
Former members explained that this was just standard group procedure. Whenever a member went out into the city on an errand, they were required to take $5 for food or emergencies so they wouldn't get picked up for vagrancy, and 3/4 to make a phone call back to the house.
So since they were leaving the house for the last time.
Yet you just followed the rule. They took their pocket money with them.
That is just, it's so heartbreakingly mundane.
Yeah.
They were following the cult's internal rules right up to the very last moment of their lives.
It shows you how deeply their minds were still operating within the logic of that closed system. They weren't panicking. They weren't having second thoughts. They were following procedure.
So the bodies are discovered by a former member, Rio D'Angelo. The police arrive. The world finds out. What was the immediate aftermath?
It was a media tsunami. Time and Newsweek both had it on their covers. But the cultural reaction was interesting. Nike actually had to discontinue that specific model of shoe, the Decade, because the association became so macabre.
And the astronomer, Alan Hale, the co-discoverer of the comet, he was horrified.
Oh, deeply. He had to hold this surreal press conference where he basically pleaded with the public, saying things like, comets are lovely astronomical objects, but they don't have apocalyptic significance. It was this perfect, tragic clash of hard science and profound delusion.
Did the group as an entity die with them in that house?
Not entirely. And this part of the story is just tragic. There were a handful of members who had left the group or had been sent away by Applewhite before the final exit, and 2 of them, Wayne Cook and Chuck Humphrey, were devastated that they had been left behind.
They felt like they'd missed the bus.
They felt like they had failed the final exam. They attempted suicide later to try and catch up with the group. Cook succeeded. Humphrey survived his first attempt but then killed himself a year later. They were desperate to rejoin their family.
And the website is still active.
To this day. Heavensgate.com. If you go there right now, it looks exactly like it did in 1997. It's got the blinking text, the starfield background, the slightly off-center text. It's a digital time capsule.
Who keeps it running?
It's maintained by 2 former members, Mark and Sarah King, who operate under the name of the Tella Foundation. They pay the hosting fees every year. They even answer emails from people. They believe their job is to preserve the information until the next level decides to open another window for new recruits.
It's a digital ghost town. A monument.
It really is.
So we've laid out the timeline, we've looked at the people.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to that central question, the why. You mentioned the term bounded choice earlier. Can you break that down for us? Because brainwashing just feels like such a lazy, simple word. It implies they were just mindless robots.
Exactly. The term brainwashing implies total passivity, that someone just reached into their heads and flipped a switch. But sociologists like John Lalich, who has studied these groups for decades, argues that it's a much more active process. She uses the analogy of a funnel.
The funnel.
Think about it. At the top of the funnel, the rim is very wide. You have lots of choices, lots of freedom. You make a small choice. You decide to go to a meeting, you read a pamphlet, still lots of room to move.
But then you make a bigger choice.
Right. You choose to leave your family. The funnel gets narrower. Then you choose to move to the campground in the middle of nowhere. Narrower still. You choose to give up your name, your money, your past. You choose to ignore your doubts.
You're burning all your bridges as you go further down.
You're systematically dismantling your escape routes. And by the time you're standing in that mansion with a cup of poisoned applesauce in your hand, you're at the very bottom of the narrowest part of that funnel. You've cut off everyone who ever loved you. You have no money, no independent identity, no hair, no sex drive. You have invested more than 20 years of your life into this one singular truth.
To turn back now would mean admitting that your entire adult life was a catastrophic mistake.
It would be psychologically impossible. So in that tiny closed system at the bottom of the funnel, death becomes the only logical step left. It's the only way to validate the lifetime of sacrifice you've already made. It's the sunk cost fallacy played out on a lethal scale.
That makes it so much more terrifying to me than just saying, oh, they were crazy. It means they were human. They were making what seemed like rational choices at every step within a system designed to make only one final choice possible.
They were looking for meaning, for purpose. They wanted to feel special. And Marshall Applewhite gave them a story where they weren't just followers. They were the most important people in the universe. They were the elite away team, chosen to save humanity's consciousness.
It's not hard to see the appeal. It reminds me a little of how we all curate our identities today. We might not wear purple shrouds, but we all have our online tribes, our political bubbles, the stories we tell ourselves about who the good guys and bad guys are.
We do, and we all crave certainty in a chaotic world. It's a fundamental human need. If someone comes along with enough confidence and says, I have the answer, it's simple, just follow me, trust me, and you will be safe and special, that is an incredibly powerful, incredibly seductive drug.
So as we wrap this up, I guess I want to leave you with a final thought. The 39 people in Heaven's Gate believed the world was about to be spaded under and recycled. They were wrong. The comet passed. The world kept spinning. But looking at our world today, with the information overload, the intense polarization, the widespread feeling that things are spinning out of control, can we really truly not understand the desire to just get out?
We can't condemn the desire. We can only mourn the tragic final destination where their particular search led them.
What vehicles or containers are you clinging to for your own identity? And maybe more importantly, who's driving your bus? It's something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.